Okay, so you want to own a funeral home. Good news? There are 18,000 of them in the United States. They sit on prime suburban corners in almost every town in the country. They are open around the clock. They sell a service that every single person living in your community will eventually require, with complete predictability for as long as humans exist. It sounds like the safest, most bulletproof business in the world. It is not. The average independent funeral home in the United States earns a net profit margin of between 8 and 12% after expenses. The average traditional funeral bill in 2024 was around $8,300. That means for every dollar a grieving family hands you across the desk, you keep less than 12 cents. The other 88 cents goes to the specialized facility mortgage, the licensed staff on call 24 hours a day, state environmental permits, specialized chemistry, and the rolling fleet sitting in your garage. The average funeral home handles around 120 services a year. That's 10 per month. At a 10% net profit margin on an $8,300 service, that's $830 in net profit per job. In a year, that's roughly $100,000 in actual profit before taxes. By the end of this video, you will understand why the funeral business, an industry that generates $20 billion in annual U.S. revenue, that operates with almost zero local competition due to strict municipal zoning laws, and that sits on some of the most valuable suburban land in America, makes its money on almost everything except the core service it is named after. And you will understand the massive cultural shift happening right now that could render half of these buildings obsolete. Let's start with what it actually costs to get in. Building a modern funeral home from scratch requires between $3.5 and $7 million in construction costs alone. That covers site development, the chapel, private viewing suites, administrative offices, and the preparation facility that ties it all together. It does not cover the land, which in a high-visibility suburban area can easily run between $800,000 and $2 million. And it does not cover the most regulatory heavy and expensive piece of the entire footprint, the prep room and climate systems. A funeral home prep room runs under strict OSHA and EPA guidelines for chemical exposure, specifically formaldehyde.
You are legally required to install a medical-grade air handling system capable of completely cycling the air in that room 12 to 15 times every single hour. A proper ventilation setup, drainage infrastructure, and stainless steel prep stations run between $100,000 and $250,000 before you ever take a single call. Then you have to fleet up. An operational facility requires a custom hearse, a lead car, a passenger limousine, and a first-call transfer van. A new hearse built on a Cadillac chassis costs between $100,000 and $150,000. Add the rest of your fleet, and rolling stock puts you down another $300,000 to $500,000. Add it up. Land, construction, ventilation, specialized fleet, municipal impact fees, insurance, and the working capital to sustain operations while you build local trust. The full cost to open a new funeral home ranges from $4 million to well over $8 million. And you haven't even taken a single call yet. Now, let's talk about what you're actually selling. The service side of the funeral business is heavily regulated. Under the Federal Trade Commission's funeral rule, you must hand every client an itemized general price list showing the exact cost of every line item. You cannot hide fees inside all-inclusive packages without breaking down the math. The non-declinable base fee, what the industry calls basic services of funeral director and staff, averages around $2,500. It covers the initial consultation, filing death certificates, securing local permits, and keeping the lights on 24 hours a day. The remaining service fees are stacked piecemeal: $900 for embalming, $400 for cosmetics and dressing, $700 for a viewing session, $800 for the chapel service, and $500 for hearse transport. Add up a traditional full-service job, and your professional fees total roughly $5,800. On paper, charging $5,800 for a few days of coordination sounds like strong cash flow. The math says otherwise. Labor and facility overhead devour those fees instantly. Deaths do not happen on a standard 9 to 5 schedule. You must employ licensed funeral directors who carry mortuary science degrees, passed national boards, and finish 2-year apprenticeships. Highly qualified directors command $70,000 to $95,000 a year, plus overtime and call pay. Payroll alone accounts for 35 to 40% of total gross revenue. Then consider the physical real estate problem. Unlike a hotel or storage facility that monetizes its footprint every single day, the average funeral home handles 120 services a year. That means your multi-million-dollar chapel, viewing rooms, and parking lots sit completely empty for 20 days out of every month. You are running a high-overhead 24-hour operation to deliver a service on which your net margins are paper-thin. The professional fees keep the lights on and pay the staff. What you actually need families to do is step into the selection room. Merchandise sales are where the economics of a traditional funeral home used to work. For decades, the casket was the entire profit engine of the business. A standard steel casket purchased wholesale from a manufacturer for $800 carries a retail price tag of $3,200. High-end hardwood or copper units bought wholesale for $2,500 sell in the showroom for $8,000 to $12,000. That's a 200 to 400% markup. Concrete burial vaults, required by most cemeteries to prevent ground settling, carry similar markups. A $400 wholesale box sells to the family for $1,400. For half a century, this retail model worked. Merchandise accounted for over 50% of total revenue and generated almost all of the owner's net take-home pay. Then, the math got completely broken by a massive cultural shift, the rapid rise of direct cremation. In 1970, the U.S. cremation rate was 5%. Almost 95% of families chose a traditional casketed burial. By 2000, cremation hit 25%. Today, the national cremation rate is over 60%, and in states like Washington, Oregon, and Nevada, it passes 75%. The financial impact on a traditional funeral facility is devastating. A traditional burial generates between $8,000 and $10,000 in total revenue, between service fees, embalming, chapel rentals, hearses, caskets, and vaults. A direct cremation, where the body moves straight from the place of death to a retort, with no viewing, no embalming, no chapel rental, and no casket, generates an average of $1,500 to $2,500. When a market flips from 70% burial to 70% cremation, top-line revenue per customer drops by up to 75%. But the $5 million building mortgage, the 24/7 staffing, the commercial fleet insurance, and the property taxes do not go down by a single penny. Discount cremation operators working out of light industrial warehouses have capitalized on this shift. They carry zero chapel overhead, keep minimal staff, and run automated retorts in industrial parks. When a discount operator advertises direct cremation for $995, a traditional suburban funeral home charging $3,000 for the exact same process loses market share rapidly. To make matters worse, federal law guarantees that consumers can buy caskets online from third parties and ship them directly to your door. You cannot charge a handling fee or refuse the delivery. The high-margin showroom upsell that sustained the industry for decades is evaporating from both sides. There is a second problem with owning a funeral home, and it involves deep operational liability. If you decide to install your own crematory to keep margins in-house, a double retort system costs between $250,000 and $400,000 for equipment alone. These units run on massive amounts of natural gas at temperatures above 1,600 degrees. State environmental protection agencies monitor these stacks constantly for opacity and particulate emissions. Mercury emissions from dental fillings are under growing regulatory fire. Installing specialized filtration scrubbers to meet local clean air mandates can push capital outlays up another $150,000 per unit. One failed stack test can trigger daily state fines that eat a year's worth of profit. Then there is the legal risk of handling chain of custody. A single clerical error, misidentifying remains, cutting a lock without state-mandated waiting periods, or performing an unauthorized prep triggers immediate, catastrophic civil lawsuits for emotional distress. Courts carry zero tolerance for mortuary negligence, and professional liability insurance carries brutal premiums once a claim hits your record. There is also the cash flow trap of pre-need trusts. Many people prepay for their funerals years in advance. Under state law, 70 to 100% of those funds must be placed into regulated trusts or insurance annuities. You cannot use that money today for payroll or mortgage payments. This is the state of the business today. You're holding a high overhead physical asset tied to strict regulatory standards, selling a traditional service that a growing majority of your customer base no longer wants to buy. So how are the survivors making the math work? They scale through regional consolidation and non-traditional revenue. The single location family owner handling 80 jobs a year is being swallowed up by corporate networks like Service Corporation International, SCI, operating under brands like Dignity Memorial. SCI operates over 1,500 funeral homes and 400 cemeteries, generating $4 billion in annual revenue. These networks survive on scale. A corporate operator buys 6 funeral homes in one metro market and centralizes everything. They move all prep work and cremation to one low-cost central warehouse in an industrial zone. They share one fleet of hearses across all 6 locations instead of buying 4 per building. They cut administrative staff, buy caskets in massive volume discounts, and squeeze operational costs down to numbers a single mom-and-pop owner cannot touch. Independent operators who survive are forced to adapt their physical space. They are ditching dark carpets and fixed church pews, converting their chapels into flexible, brightly lit event spaces. They are adding commercial catering kitchens, outdoor patios, and liquor licenses to host catered celebrations of life, recovering their lost merchandise margins on food, alcohol, and event management fees.
The funeral home is one of the oldest physical businesses in American commercial life. Death is constant, but the revenue model that sustained these facilities for a century is changing fast. The 18,000 facilities operating right now will not close overnight, but the business you are buying today is fundamentally different from the business it was in 1990. The product that used to drive all of your profit is being replaced by low-cost alternatives, while the multi-million-dollar building sitting on the corner still demands its mortgage payment every single month. The chapel keeps the lights on, the prep room keeps the regulators watching, and the central cremation warehouse down the road is either your biggest competitive threat or the only way your balance sheet survives the decade. You decide.